these pages turning. Yesterday is burning. Now's the time for learning. The future.
Ooh, it's so warm in here. Got the little space heater going. And this is important for the epoxy to cure because it is cold today. So Aladino has prepared the balsa, which is here. It just arrived.
Freedom has come. Hearing sound and color. These days are getting better. Yesterday is over and the future has come.
The balsa. Boy oh boy has this been a story, filled with all the classic heartbreak, frustration, and we hope triumph of an old parable. Our boat is insulated with balsa, both a blessing and a curse. It'll be a blessing when we're out sailing in a quiet and stiff boat that doesn't freeze or overheat quite as easily as some. But it's a curse right now, as we work on removing and replacing rotten sections of balsa, a job that, to be totally honest, we didn't expect to have to do. But oh well, we're rolling with the punches. It wouldn't be a refit if there weren't some unexpected surprises along the way.
It's funny, when I had to do these sort of jobs, working as a boat builder, it was always from the outside. Most of the times it's because of an accident that happened during racing. Since the interior is unharmed and usually hard to access and get to, you make the repairs from the outside. So now instead I'm doing it from the inside. And I'm using epoxy, which is luxurious. Usually this is just done with polyester putty. You also, most of the times, combine it with vacuum. But for our purposes, this is much easier now, and quicker, and good enough.
We bought these balsa sheets from a fiberglass supply store nearby. They're not horrendously expensive, and they easily bend to the curvature of the hull.
Why is this one inside out, you might ask? No?
Well, you mean because this one is balsa up and
Yes.
this one is fiberglass up? I don't know. I do ask.
I also make mistakes. Because this one is wider and here it's narrower, but I cut it when it was this way around, so now it goes on that way.
Okay.
And it's no problem. But yeah, usually there is this fiberglass backing on here, which is really nice. It holds it all together. So I put it against the hull this way, because then it can curve both ways.
Oh, I see.
This way it does it a bit less.
Yeah, totally.
But on a small piece like that, it's no big deal.
With one balsa repair done, time to move on to the next. Yes, there's quite a few rotten spots. And plus, even in the areas that aren't rotten, we want to seal everything up much better so that this won't happen again in the future.
So a quick note about this balsa insulation actually, because I know we've gotten a few comments from people being like, well, balsa isn't the best insulator, there's foams out there that are way better. And that's definitely true. But this boat was built in the 80s and I guess foam technology maybe wasn't as advanced then. And we don't want to go through the cost and the effort of replacing all this balsa with foam. I mean, it just would be too much and it wouldn't necessarily make sense. But I will say that earlier I actually put my hand against the hull where the balsa was cut away and it's really cold right now and the bare fiberglass was freezing. But then, you know, you touch the balsa right next to it and it's not nearly as cold. So it's maybe not the best insulator out there, but it definitely does the job more than just straight fiberglass wood. I think it'll also really help to keep the noise down in the boat. You know, waves on the hull are a nice sound as long as they're not deafening. And yeah, I think this will, I'm happy about it, especially once all the rot is removed. I think it will be a really lovely feature.
At least, these are the things we've been telling ourselves as we rip the walls apart. It's been a process.
It's also stiffening up the boat, not that it would be required. Like, this is a very narrow boat, has a lot of bulkheads and is built in a really beefy manner. But having this extra balsa really stiffens it additionally.
Yeah.
Which means we'll be the fastest out there. Sorry. Right. 25,000 pound boat.
When it was all in place, we hung up some plastic as temporary insulation and left the heaters to do their thing. Meanwhile, another project was awaiting.
Now we have a lot of projects on the go in this episode. The chart table used to house this big ice box, and we don't really want an ice box, we do want a fridge, and we want to install it over there. So this is going to be converted to more usable space, because at the moment, a big portion of this chart table is just insulation. It's time to rip up this hideous Formica. I hate it so much, so I'm going to be stoked to get rid of it.
So the camera's battery died partway, and I didn't notice for a little while, so you didn't actually see me removing the screws holding the top in place. That's why I needed to remove the Formica first, to access the screws, and then remove the top.
Alright, so the inside of the chart table. It's a whole bunch of insulation surrounding the icebox. So I guess the job now is going to be slowly to chip away at this insulation, basically just to create an empty cavity that we can then design how we want it.
Meanwhile, Aladino was inching closer towards being able to close up our decks.
And once again, it's blocking time. And now it's just a matter of putting them in place how they should. And then I am pre-drilling all the holes. And I'm not securing them quite yet. So this is all just preparation. Then they come off again. And we do want to add a little bit of epoxy. So that's why for now it's just preparing the holes and dry fitting them into place.
A huge goal for this visit in the States is to close the decks. After replacing almost half the deck beams and all the blocking last time around, we're getting ready to do final installations and cover it all up again with plywood, epoxy, and fiberglass. It'll be nice to have a solid deck to walk on again. The next day, we had a just work, no filming day. Those happen sometimes. So let's get you caught up on what we did. Hi, good morning. Another day here in the boatyard. A lot happened yesterday. Both Aladino and I were focused on one task each yesterday. Come have a look. So, this was Aladino's task, removing the icebox from the interior of the chart table. It was kind of a hellish job. I started it, and then I was kind of like, I don't know how to proceed. But he basically had to cut out the fiberglass liner that was the icebox and then dig out all this foam.
And that thing was built like a tank.
Yeah.
I can show it to you. It's downstairs. It's like 1/2 inch fiberglass.
Yeah. But the really unpleasant part is that this foam turns into really fine dust and gets everywhere. Moving forward, I'll show you what I've been working on. By the way, this plastic is good for keeping heat in as we heat with the space heaters. Come on there. But it's also really good for dust control. I was also creating a whole lot of dust. I managed to scrape and sand this bulkhead. I haven't done all the edge pieces yet, so that'll be my focus today. I also scraped and sanded this bulkhead. And, okay, maybe actually I won't go in here. You go in there, Dini, and turn around to face the camera. And these two bulkheads are all prepped and ready for paint. Yeah.
Primer.
Primer. Yeah, so we need to get some primer and then we can actually start painting the rebirth, which I'm really stoked about. So these walls are going to become white again, but the reason why we stripped all this off is because we want to use a higher quality, very waterproof paint with sort of an epoxy-based primer. Especially this bulkhead is the shower bulkhead, so we want to make sure it's as waterproof as it can be so that it does not start rotting. That would be very bad news.
Meanwhile, out here, we're getting ready to close the decks, and the next step to accomplish that is put the blocks into place, so they are in there for good. So I've prepared all the blocks to accept 2 screws so that they screw into each beam, and all we're doing now is mix up some epoxy, put in some fillers so it doesn't flow out of there right away, and then we're permanently securing the blocks into place. So it should be a pretty simple step now. Yeah, should be pretty rewarding as we have worked on this for many weeks, putting it all together. And now it's gonna go in place. Let's get some screws in.
All right. Now the epoxy that we're applying now is basically just to create a bit of a waterproofing on the edges, but in the back here you see there's still space, and that void will be filled with more epoxy later on.
Done! And what was only a few minutes on YouTube actually took 3 days. And now we're out of epoxy!
I know.
So many things on hold, but there's also many things that don't require epoxy at the moment. So that's what we continue with. Which actually is preparation to close the decks. I ordered plywood. It was also a challenge. We had to call many places because supplies have a challenge at the moment. But what I can do now is I'll bring the track saw up here, and since you remember, I had made a parallel cut to the hull initially with a router. but now I figured it's much easier to just make a straight cut with the track saw. So yeah, a little bit of prep work to get this closed pretty soon. Here on the port side, you can see that I've already made those preparations. This one here is a straight cut now, and I did that because of a couple of reasons. One is that there still were visible repairs from underneath from the old plywood, so I wanted to get rid of those, and that allowed me to do that by bringing the cut further in a little bit. And then I also selected lengths that I can take out of a full sheet of plywood by always ending up one butt joint on a big beam or either a double beam where the bulkheads are placed. So this was the initial piece that I made, and as you can see now, it was much easier to just do the round contour of the hull, but this side instead is straight instead of having to do two curved shapes. We've actually ordered Sapele plywood now, which is super exciting because I started doing these before we left. Actually, I was excited to get everything done, but then we saw that it was a very stark contrast from the interior, since this will stay visible. That's why now we will continue with Sapele plywood, which will look awesome.
Our decks are made of 2 layers of plywood. After Aladino finishes this first layer, then he'll create a second, larger, overlapping layer to stagger the joints for added strength. But that's not happening quite yet.
Gonna reach for the sky. Suddenly the stars aren't so far away. I can feel the light shining on my face. Gonna reach for the sky. Gonna reach for the sky.
Right now I'm dismantling the quarter berth. This is going to be where our batteries are stored, and we're going to make a few changes to, first of all, elongate the quarter berth so that we can actually fit on it because it was really short before, and also adding a bit more space for storage of lithium, probably batteries. So that's this.
Floating in a dream that I can't explain. Don't know what it means, but I can't complain. So I reach for the sky. Gonna reach for the sky.
And of course, there's another reason for dismantling the chart table and quarter berth as well. You guessed it, the balsa. We could already see several rotten sections through the glass, and it was time to replace this poorly sealed glass layer with something that would prevent these problems from happening again in the future.
I'm gonna try. Oh, I'm gonna try.
So I think we'll end this episode here. It's been another really productive week. I feel really good about it. And I thought to wrap it up, because there's been so much going on, that I'll just do a little walkthrough of what the boat's looking like at the moment. The blocking is permanently installed now with epoxy and with screws, which is really exciting because that means we're one step closer towards actually closing the decks. And not only is the blocking in place, but we've also cut away, or Aladino has cut away the decks in a nice straight line in preparation for the plywood, which is arriving in just 2 days. So we can actually seal this all up. Inside the boat, there's also been a great deal of change. Right now it's a bit of a journey to get into the boat because our ladders are all gone, because I was working over here. But if you follow me inside, most notably, of course, that the chart table has been gutted of the icebox and all the insulation that was previously here. The quarter berth is ready to be rebuilt in a bit more of a practical way for our purposes. And of course, we've exposed more balsa. So I'm also feeling pretty good about over here. And in the saloon, we've got the brand new balsa on the walls, or on the hull. That's all ready to be sealed up. Aladino has done all the grinding, so we're ready for epoxy and fiberglass. We're basically just waiting on epoxy at the moment because we might be getting a deal to get some more epoxy, so we're sort of holding off ordering that for the present, but yeah. So I just wanted to say thank you so much for being here, for following this project with us, for leaving your comments, your like, and subscribing to the channel. We really, really appreciate it. It's very exciting and adds a really different element to a project like this when you're sharing it with a whole bunch of people. And it frankly inspires us to do better. We also want to say a really big thanks to our patrons for making this all possible. We wouldn't have bought this boat if it weren't for the patrons, and we wouldn't be able to keep up with all of this. So thank you guys for keeping the project alive. We are so appreciative of what you do for us. If you'd like to be a patron, you can do so for as little as $2 a month, and you get access to behind the scenes real-time updates because YouTube is not in real time. I think that's been made clear by now, but if you want to know what we're up to in real life, we post every Tuesday on Patreon with an update about that. An extra big thanks to the folks whose names are now appearing on the screen. These folks really go the extra mile to make sure that Magic Carpet keeps being produced, and we will see you all, as always, next Friday. Alright, the plywood debacle. It arrived, and it was completely not what we would expect for marine plywood. I have COVID.